Morning came to Manhattan with a pale, pearly light that washed the glass towers and softened the edges of the avenues. Outside the studio, a small crowd had formed behind metal barricades, bundled in coats and clutching phones as if they were periscopes into a world just beyond the revolving door. On the main stage, the view shimmered under rehearsal lights. In the green room marked with a simple placard, Meghan sat near a window that framed a slice of the Hudson in winter gray. She wore a cream jacket with clean lines and had tucked a strand of hair behind one ear with the precise, unstudied grace that comes from practice. On the low table sat chamomile tea, a tidy folder, and a bowl of mandarin oranges whose bright skins looked lurid under the fluorescent light. Her publicist, a woman with careful eyes and athletic composure, paced gently as she spoke. They will open on your new foundation, then pivot to your book chapter about resilience in public life. They have audience cards if they do questions. If it turns personal, we reset to the initiative. You know the phrase we discussed. Meghan nodded. Share what serves, protect what does not. Exactly. Breathe, then bridge. You do not owe the room anything you would not give to a stranger on the street. A polite knock. A producer with a short headset stepped in. 5 to pre-show, 10 to air. We will mic in 3. Anything you need, just ask. Thank you, Meghan said, and it sounded like habit rather than gratitude. The producer lingered a fraction longer than necessary, taking her in. There was a tension around the guest today that was not entirely about fame. It was voltage. The show had booked her for the cause, but everyone knew the view thrives on friction. The producer withdrew and the door sighed shut. Across the hall, Joy Behar adjusted her red frames in a dressing room mirror and dabbed a fingertip of powder along her jawline. She grinned at her own reflection with a tease of mischief and rolled her shoulders to loosen them. A segment producer hovered, running through timing. We start warm, Joy. The intro, the initiative, the clip, then a light beat about the kids. The conversation will want to tilt. We stay upright as long as we can. Joy smirked. Upright is overrated. Honest is better. Honest, yes, the producer said, hearing the quiet warning in her own voice. But let us keep the temperature human. Joy tipped her head. On television, human is relative. Back in the green room, Meghan's mic was threaded under her jacket with quiet efficiency. The audio engineer murmured a weather comment, pinned the pack, and stepped back. There was a glint in Meghan's eyes that did not match the soothing manner of her hands. It was the hard gloss of someone who has learned to wear composure like armor. At the 2-minute mark, the floor manager gathered the hosts in the wing. Whoopi measured the room with that calm that could settle a stampede. Sunny flipped a card and tucked it under the stack. Sarah practiced a neutral smile and reminded herself to reach for the rope, not the knife, if the conversation fell in a well. Joy bounced once on the balls of her feet like a boxer testing the ring. The band hit its bright little sting. The applause sign pulsed. The red light woke up. Good morning, America. Whoopi's voice carried that Sunday warmth she could summon on a weekday. Today we are joined by a woman who has spent the last year turning public storms into private purpose. She is here to talk about her new foundation and what it means to stand firm under scrutiny. Please welcome Meghan Markle. Applause filled the studio, not thunderous but attentive, dotted with the high little cheers that always find their way in. Meghan walked out in time with the music, smiled with just enough teeth, and crossed to the semicircle of chairs. She shook hands the way practiced guests do, eye contact, squeeze, release, thank you, so good to be here. When she sat, the audience settled into its hush. A short video rolled on the massive screen. A montage of community classrooms where girls built small circuits and wrote in bright notebooks. A clinic where a woman laughed with her infant at a checkup. A library where a circle of elders traded stories while children drew galaxies. The voiceover was clean and measured. Meghan's foundation would fund programs that taught resilience as a skill, not a slogan. When the clip ended, there was a softer applause, the kind people offer to purpose. Meghan picked up the thread like a seamstress. She spoke about partnership, about the quicksand of online cruelty and the scaffolding of mentorship. Her words were careful but not cold. She had a way of making a sentence carry both edge and velvet. The hosts nodded, asked about metrics, asked about scaling. It was steady, respectable television. Then Joy leaned in. The air pressure shifted by a degree no thermostat could track. "You speak beautifully about resilience," Joy said. "I admire anyone who builds something good out of noise. But I want to ask the question our audience will wonder if I do not. How do you balance your call for privacy with living so publicly? Books, documentaries, podcasts. It looks to some like you want the spotlight on your terms." Whoopi glanced up, a microsecond flick of the eyes toward the gallery. Sunny inhaled as if she could smooth the air with oxygen. Sarah adjusted a card she did not need. The view of views had occurred. Meghan set her hands, palm to palm, a steeple without any religion in it. "Privacy is not a vow of silence, Joy. It is a boundary. I share what serves the work. I do not share what endangers my family." A pocket of applause rose up and fell. Joy's smile thinned, not unkind, but purposeful. "I hear that," Joy said. "But you have built a platform on telling your story. Some people in this country see that as controlling the narrative. Others call it cashing in. I am asking, not accusing. Where do you draw the line between speaking your truth and selling it?" Meghan's eyes cooled by a degree. "The foundation work pays for itself and for others. My story belongs to me. My children do not. That is the line." Joy nodded, and for a breath the room seemed to reset. Sunny stepped in, asking about school partnerships. Meghan answered. For 30 seconds the show found the sidewalk again. And then, as if remembering the producer's warning and deciding to ignore it, Joy stepped off the curb. "Let us talk about the monarchy for a second," Joy said lightly. "You have been candid about its shortcomings. Some think that was brave. Others think it was disloyal. If your aim is healing, why keep reopening old wounds on television?" The audience made that sound crowds make when a conductor raises the stick a little higher. Whoopi's hand moved under the table, a small, calming motion. "Sarah tried to throw a lifeline, and we can get back to the foundation in a second," she said quickly, her smile full of please and thank you. Meghan did not look away from Joy. "Healing needs air," she said. "Pretending there was no wound is why infections spread. Telling the truth is not reopening. It is cleaning. You can clean without naming names," Joy said, her voice firmer now. "People out there feel like you are dragging family fights into public squares." Meghan's chin lifted. "I am not dragging anything. I am refusing to be buried under it." The audience applauded again, louder this time, a tide trying to decide whether to come in or go out. Whoopi slid in with her deep, steady tone. "We are all grown-ups here," she said. "We can hold more than one truth at once. The world is messy. That is not new." Joy glanced at Whoopi, then back at Meghan, and she made the choice that would turn the morning into a headline. Her voice gentled, which somehow made it sharper. "Do you think you ever misjudged the role you married into? That maybe the institution was bigger than you realized. That you wanted the crown without the cost?" The studio went silent in a way that consumes air. Even the camera dolly, sliding on rubber wheels, seemed to hesitate. Meghan held the silence as if she had been expecting it all along. She spoke with a softness that read like steel. "I knew the cost. I lived it. I refused to let my children inherit the bill." A murmur threaded the audience. Sunny stepped toward a legal angle that might cool things down. "Public figures accept scrutiny," she began. "The question is how much is enough." Joy did not yield. She drew one more card from the deck, and you could see on Whoopi's face that she recognized the card as it turned. "You have also been compared to Diana," Joy said. "You or your supporters. Do you think those comparisons are fair, or are they a strategy to win the public on empathy?" Meghan's mouth flickered at the name, the slightest tremor of an old fault line. "I think invoking a lost woman to score points is unkind," she said, "to her and to me. I am not anyone's symbol. I am a person." Joy nodded as if satisfied, then leaned in again. "Then let us keep it in the present. Some of your critics say you want to be untouchable, that you want to say hard things without being challenged, that you want applause without questions." Meghan's publicist, watching on a small monitor backstage, shut her eyes for a beat and whispered the reset line to no one. "Share what serves. Protect what does not." On stage, Meghan pivoted to the camera, not to plea but to anchor. I wrote a book chapter for girls in classrooms who are learning that the world will love them loud and punish them louder. I am here for them. The rest of this is theater. Joy's smile went small and bright. The host in her knew that theater is a trigger word for an audience that suspects they are being worked. So we are theater now, Joy said. Is that what this is? Meghan held her gaze. Every room with cameras is theater. The question is whether we use it to illuminate or to burn. The gallery buzzed. A producer ran a finger across her throat at the director, but the director shook his head, meaning we ride this to break, then breathe. Sarah tried again, reaching for the rope. We have a question from the audience, she said, and motioned to a woman in the third row whose card had been pre-selected for safety. The woman stood, voice soft. Thank you for the foundation. My daughter used your worksheet at school. It helped. Meghan smiled, real relief in her face for the first time. That is why I am here, but Joy was not finished. And because this is fiction, because every story explaining a fire must locate the spark, she asked the one question that would light the morning. Last one, Joy said, you say you protect your children by drawing boundaries, yet you keep returning to shows like this one. Does the boundary only hold when it benefits the brand? There it was, not shouted, surgical. The audience did not gasp this time. It leaned forward and waited. Meghan's hands opened on her knees. She looked like someone who has trained for a marathon and finds herself in a sprint instead. When she answered, her voice was even, and each word seemed to place itself like a stone along a path. Brand is a word people use when they want to shrink a person. I am not a brand. I am a mother who learned the hard way that if you do not draw your own lines, strangers will draw them around your children. I am here because the work needs oxygen. I will never trade my family for it. The audience applauded fully now, but the applause did not drain the tension. It amplified it. Joy's eyes were not cruel. That would be easier. They were inquisitive in the way of someone who believes inquiry is a virtue even when aim goes off. If you believe conversation is oxygen, Joy said, then you will not mind one more honest breath. Would you sit down privately with the people you have criticized and offer them the same clarity? Without cameras, without the theater. Meghan looked almost relieved at that, because at last the question had become a door instead of a blade. Yes, she said, I always have. The door was never locked on my side. Whoopi leaned in, decisive, and cut the segment with the authority of a captain who sees weather. We are going to break. We will be right back with more on the foundation, and a surprise guest who brought snacks because it is Tuesday and we all need joy. Stay with us. The band delivered its sting. The red light dimmed. The crew spilled out of their held breath like athletes hitting grass after a sprint. Meghan sat very still. Joy settled back with the ghost of a smile that looked less like victory than like recognition. In the wing, the publicist pressed 2 fingers to her temple and let out a long, measured exhale. In the control room, the director rolled her chair back and stared at the ceiling for exactly 1 second before calling cues for return. On social monitors, the last 30 seconds spiked like a seismograph. At the edge of the stage, a runner handed Meghan a small bottle of water and whispered, "You are fine," in a voice that seemed meant for a child in a dentist chair. Meghan thanked her and took a sip. The water felt like glass. "We will reset," the publicist said from the wing, hands making smooth downward motions as if to calm a skittish horse. "We return to the initiative. We do one audience question. We exit, no more theater." Meghan nodded, then kept nodding as if it helped stitch something back together beneath her ribs. On the couch, Joy leaned toward Whoopi, said something that made the older woman tip her head and sigh through her nose. Sunny checked her notes and found the bridge she would try to lay down. Sarah smoothed a non-existent wrinkle in the tablecloth and touched the gold pendant at her throat, a private signal that she would try once more to bring the room to shore. The countdown began again, back in 5, back in 3. When the red light blinked awake, the set looked exactly as it had looked before. The host's smiles reset to their default warmth, the music softened away. Whoopi welcomed back the viewers with a measured promise about cooking later in the hour. The audience settled, the way a classroom settles after a thunderclap. But the morning had shifted on its axis, and everyone felt it. The fiction of control that daytime television cells had been tested and found thin. The rest of the hour would either mend that thinness or tear it. In the quiet between Whoopi's welcome and Sunny's question about school grants, Joy glanced once more at Meghan, and in that look sat the truth of live television. Not enemy, not friend, opposite poles in the same storm, holding their ground. Outside, the city went on with its routines. Taxis rushed and halted. Dogs pulled their humans across intersections with purpose. A woman in a coffee line read an article about the foundation without realizing the segment had already turned. New York rarely pauses for broadcast weather. Inside, however, the air held a drop in pressure that all sailors know. A front had moved in. The crew felt it, the hosts felt it, the guest felt it. And because this is a story about a morning that finds its fault line, the hour would not end where the producers meant it to. It would follow the line until it cracked, and then it would decide if the crack became a window or a broken pane. For now, Meghan folded her hands, Joy adjusted her glasses, and the conversation picked up right where it left off, as if the last question had not rearranged the furniture of the room. As if theater could be unwritten once the curtain had risen. The second segment of The View began as if nothing had happened. The audience clapped on cue, the music brightened the room, and the hosts smiled with the mechanical warmth of professionals who could hold a conversation on a moving train. Yet underneath that practiced calm, there was a vibration, faint but steady, like the hum of a machine running too hot. Whoopi opened the floor again, voice slow and reassuring. "We're back with Meghan Markle," she said. "We've been talking about her foundation and her work in education, and I think we can all agree it's been inspiring to hear how much she's trying to change the way young people see themselves." The audience responded with applause, polite and measured. It was the kind of applause that says, "We are still here, we are still with you." Meghan smiled, nodding, thanking them with that composed grace she'd perfected long ago. "Thank you, Whoopi," she said softly. "The goal is really to focus on building resilience from the ground up. I want children, especially young girls, to feel seen before the world tells them who they're supposed to be." Whoopi nodded. "That's powerful. You know, we've all been through our share of public scrutiny in this business, but you seem to carry it differently now, like you've learned to wear it lightly." Meghan chuckled softly. "I think I just stopped trying to control what people think. You can't win a conversation you're not invited to join, so I learned to walk away from it." There it was, the idea of walking away, a subtle echo of the earlier tension. The audience caught it, too. The applause sign flashed, but only a few people clapped. Most watched, waiting. Joy Behar crossed her legs slowly, setting down her mug with deliberate calm. The cameras caught her movement. The control room cut to her angle, close enough to read the spark behind her eyes. "I get that," Joy began, voice measured but pointed. "But don't you think sometimes walking away looks like quitting? Especially when people are depending on your story to represent them?" The question hung between them like a drawn curtain. Meghan blinked once, her posture straightening slightly. "Quitting," she repeated, as if testing the word. "I wouldn't call it that, I'd call it self-preservation. There's a difference between giving up and deciding that you've given enough." Joy nodded, but the faint smile didn't fade. "I respect that," she said. "But when you and Prince Harry made the choice to leave the royal family, a lot of people felt, well, abandoned. They thought you had a duty to stick it out, to reform the system from the inside." The control room camera zoomed in again. The temperature in the studio dropped a degree. Meghan's expression didn't waver, but her jaw flexed once, an imperceptible tell that those words had found their mark. She leaned forward slightly. "Joy, I think people forget that the royal family isn't a fairy tale. It's an institution, and institutions don't change just because you smile at them politely. Sometimes you have to step outside of them to see clearly." Joy nodded, lips pursed. "Sure," she said. "But don't you think stepping outside and then talking about it on every network keeps you tethered to it? It's like trying to leave a party while still standing in the doorway." The audience tittered softly, unsure whether to laugh. The tension was visible now, a thread stretching between two women who understood the power of a well-timed line. Meghan's smile was faint but sharp. If you think my life is a party, Joy, I'd invite you to trade places for a week. Whoopi stepped in quickly. Ladies, she said, raising a hand, we've got two truths here. One person walking away for peace, another pointing out the noise that follows. Let's remember people tune in to learn, not to take sides. The tension thinned just enough for the segment to move forward. Sunny Hostin jumped in, her tone calm but firm. Meghan, you've spoken about media pressure and how it affects mental health. Do you ever wish you stayed quiet about those experiences? Would that have protected your peace more? Meghan turned to Sunny, grateful for the lifeline. Honestly, silence was never peace, she said. It was survival. There's a difference. When you're constantly asked to play a part that hurts you, speaking up isn't defiance, it's self-respect. That answer drew strong applause. It was measured, emotional, and true to her message. For a moment, it looked like the segment might return to safer waters. Then Joy leaned forward again. Her tone was polite, but her words were a match. I get what you're saying, she said. But I also think some people out there might hear that and say, here we go again, Meghan Markle talking about herself. Do you ever think about the fatigue people feel hearing the same story? The applause died instantly. Meghan's eyes hardened. The smile slipped just enough for the audience to see the flash underneath. Fatigue, she repeated. You mean the fatigue of hearing a woman explain why she deserves respect? The audience clapped, loud this time. Joy held her ground, eyes narrowing slightly, not out of anger but focus. I'm talking about repetition, she said. At some point, people stop listening when it feels like a lecture. Whoopi gave a small cough, an anchor's attempt to shift gears. All right, we're going to take a quick break. But Meghan wasn't done. She leaned forward, voice calm but cutting. Or maybe people stop listening because they're uncomfortable being reminded that their systems aren't as fair as they thought. That landed like a dropped glass. The sound technicians froze. The producer in the booth mouthed, "Wrap it," to Whoopi, but the red light stayed on. The segment had become too good for live television to walk away from. Joy gave a small shrug, her voice still level. It's not about fairness, Meghan. It's about relatability. You keep talking about the world not treating you right, but a lot of people are out there working 2 jobs just to afford groceries. To them, royal titles and Malibu mansions aren't oppression. The crowd made a collective murmur, half in agreement, half in discomfort. Meghan blinked, processing. The remark had struck a nerve. You think pain is a competition? She said. That only certain people are allowed to talk about it because others have it worse. That's not how empathy works. Joy nodded once. Fair point, she said, but empathy cuts both ways. If you want people to see you as real, you've got to see them too. The audience broke into uncertain applause again, unsure whom to support. Whoopi raised her hand. Let's pause right here, she said gently. We're going to come back and talk about resilience, because I think that's what both of you are really getting at. The band's outro filled the air as the cameras faded to commercial. But backstage, the calm dissolved instantly. The moment the red light dimmed, the control room erupted in quiet chaos. The senior producer leaned toward the floor manager, voice low and urgent. Keep them apart for 60 seconds, she said. Reset tone before return. On set, Joy leaned back, sipping her coffee with a casual shrug, as if she hadn't just set the internet on fire. Meghan sat frozen for a few seconds, staring into the middle distance, her mic still clipped under her jacket. Her publicist darted from the wings, whispering, breathe, reset, they'll shift topics. Meghan nodded slowly, though her jaw was locked tight. In the control room, an assistant scrolled through Twitter feeds faster than anyone could speak. Within 3 minutes, clips from the segment were already circulating. Captions bloomed across screens. Joy Behar challenges Meghan Markle on privacy. Tense exchange on The View goes viral. The senior producer exhaled sharply. We've lost the initiative, she said. We're off the rails now. On stage, the crew reset mugs, adjusted cards, dabbed powder under bright lights. The floor manager's hand signals fluttered like semaphore flags. The hosts were back in their seats, each performing calm, but every one of them aware that when they went live again, the air would feel different. When the red light returned, the audience clapped dutifully, but even that sounded strained. Whoopi began, smiling tightly. Welcome back to The View. We're here with Meghan Markle, and we're having a passionate conversation about privacy, purpose, and public life. The camera cut to Meghan, who smiled politely, though the fatigue was visible now around her eyes. Whoopi continued, "Now, Meghan, let's get back to the foundation. You've talked about the importance of mentorship. What does that look like in practice?" Meghan straightened, grateful for the redirect. "It's about showing up," she said. "Not just with money or publicity, but with presence. I think people underestimate how powerful it is when you tell someone, 'I see you and I believe you belong here.' That's what our programs are built around." Applause again, this time genuine. Meghan began to relax. For a brief moment it looked like the storm had passed. But then Joy spoke again, voice soft, almost conversational. "That's wonderful," she said. "But just out of curiosity, do you ever think about how much easier it is to be seen when every camera in the world is already pointed at you?" A single nervous laugh rippled through the audience. Meghan's smile faltered. "What are you implying?" Joy spread her hands innocently. "I'm just saying, visibility isn't the same as vulnerability. You talk about being silenced, but you've had more interviews than most politicians." "It feels like you're not silenced, you're amplified." Whoopi shifted in her seat, eyes closing briefly as if praying for patience. Meghan's reply came quieter but sharper. "Having a microphone doesn't mean being heard. You can speak into the world every day and still not be understood." The crowd reacted with a small wave of applause, half supportive, half awkward. Joy smiled again, and it was a polite smile, but beneath it was something more pointed. "Maybe," she said, "but sometimes when you keep repeating yourself, people stop trying to understand." Silence. Meghan stared at her. "You know, Joy, it's interesting how women are always told to stop talking once their story makes other people uncomfortable." That line landed. The audience broke into full applause, but this time Joy didn't back down. "I'm not telling you to stop talking," she said calmly. "I'm just asking why you keep coming back to the same room if you say it hurts you." And that was the moment, the pivot when tension stopped being undercurrent and became the whole tide. Meghan leaned forward. Her voice dropped an octave, steady but cold. "Because this is what accountability looks like. Because every time someone like you asks that question, I realize how much work is still left to do." The audience gasped softly, the way people do when they realize something real has been said in a place that prefers polish. Whoopi's voice came quickly, the peacemaker's last line of defense. "All right, let's take another short break," she said, gesturing toward the camera. "We'll be right back." The red light dimmed again. This time there was no small talk. Meghan exhaled, shoulders rigid. Joy looked away, pretending to check her notes, but her lips pressed into a thin line that suggested she knew the clip would explode before lunchtime. The publicist appeared again, whispering into Meghan's ear, "We can leave after this next segment. Say one more thing about the initiative, then exit politely." Meghan nodded. "No exit, I'll finish what I started." The producer walked past them, headset tilted. "We're trending already," she said quietly to an assistant. "Don't lose the energy, but God help us if this blows up." From the control room, the director's voice echoed through the intercom. "Back live in 30, get ready." In the audience, people whispered. Phones buzzed discreetly as staff asked guests not to record. The stage glowed under the lights again, but it no longer felt like a friendly morning show. It felt like a trial. Whoopi straightened in her chair, ready to keep the ship from capsizing. Joy lifted her mug, expression unreadable. Meghan sat poised, every muscle arranged like a sculpture designed to withstand pressure. When the red light flicked on again, the broadcast continued, smooth on the surface, volatile underneath. And though no one said it out loud, everyone in that studio knew something irreversible had begun. The audience could feel it. The hosts could feel it. Meghan could feel it. The show wasn't over yet. But the story, the one that would fill headlines, ignite think pieces, and dominate the next news cycle, was already writing itself. What happened next would decide whether the morning ended in grace or in chaos. And right now, chaos was winning. The red light came on again, but the atmosphere in the studio had changed completely. Gone was the polite energy of a morning talk show. In its place was a quiet intensity that even the bright studio lights couldn't disguise. The cameras rolled smoothly, but there was tension in every movement, like everyone knew they were walking on thin glass and pretending it was carpet. Whoopi Goldberg started the segment with her steady, practiced calm. "We're back on The View with Meghan Markle," she said, her tone warm but deliberate. "We've been talking about purpose, resilience, and the challenges of living under a microscope." It's a conversation that's clearly struck a chord. There was applause, tentative, polite. Meghan smiled faintly, trying to reset the energy. "Thank you," she said. "I think conversations like this matter. They're not always easy, but they're necessary." The audience nodded, some clapping again. Meghan's voice was calm, measured, as if she were trying to steer the ship back into calm waters. For a few moments it worked. Sunny Hostin leaned in, her expression thoughtful. "Meghan, you've spoken a lot about being misunderstood. I think a lot of people watching can relate to that in their own ways. What's something that people still get wrong about you?" It was the kind of question that usually invited vulnerability. Meghan paused, her gaze lowering for a brief second before she answered. "I think people assume they know my motives," she said softly. "They think I do things for attention, when in reality I just don't want to live my life being misrepresented. I've learned that silence allows lies to become the truth." There was a hush. The audience listened closely. For a fleeting moment, Meghan seemed sincere, even fragile. Her voice carried that kind of quiet that makes people lean forward. But then Joy Behar broke the silence. "Sure," she said with a small shrug, "but don't you think speaking out so often creates more noise than clarity? Every time you talk about wanting privacy, you're sitting in another interview. That's confusing for people." The audience reacted audibly this time. Some murmured, a few laughed nervously. Meghan looked at Joy directly, the faintest flicker of disbelief passing through her face. "I don't think privacy means silence," Meghan said evenly. "It means choice. I'm choosing what to share, not letting others choose for me." Joy sipped from her mug, unbothered. "That's fair," she said, "but if you're choosing what to share, isn't that still control? And isn't control just another kind of publicity?" The control room went still. The director whispered into his headset, "Stay wide, don't cut." "Let it breathe." Whoopi shifted uncomfortably. "All right, ladies," she said carefully, "let's not talk about control, let's talk about compassion." But Meghan didn't look away from Joy. "Control isn't a bad thing," she said, her tone sharpening. "When your life becomes everyone else's playground, taking back control is survival. That's not manipulation, it's self-defense." Joy nodded, but her eyes gleamed with that journalistic instinct that senses a raw vein. "But Meghan," she said, leaning forward, "you've built a career talking about how hurt you've been by the press and the institution you left behind. Doesn't rehashing that pain on every platform just keep you stuck in it?" A ripple of murmurs went through the audience. The air thickened again. Meghan straightened her posture, her smile gone now. "Joy," she said slowly, "you're assuming that talking about pain is the same as living in it. I share my experiences because other people go through similar things." "That's what empathy looks like." Joy didn't back down. "But isn't empathy a two-way street?" she asked. "You say you want understanding, but I'm not hearing much understanding for the people you criticize, the family, the media, the country that once adored you." "Where's the grace in that?" The studio went silent. Not a single audience member clapped or moved. The tension was electric now, charged with something deeper than disagreement. Meghan's expression hardened. "Grace," she repeated, the word landing like glass. "I spent years showing grace. I smiled when I was hurting. I played the part everyone wanted me to play, but grace doesn't mean submission. There comes a point when you stop being polite to protect people who never protected you." The audience gasped softly, then broke into scattered applause. Some cheered, others hesitated. Joy kept her tone calm but unyielding. "I understand that," she said, "but at what point does telling your truth start sounding like blaming everyone else? Because that's what people see." That landed hard. The audience made a low sound, a mix of discomfort and fascination. Meghan's hands tightened around her coffee cup, the porcelain trembling slightly against her fingers. "People can see whatever they want," she said sharply. "That doesn't make them right." The cameras zoomed in slightly. The shot framed both women, eye to eye, the tension practically humming through the air. Whoopi raised her voice, trying to diffuse it. "Okay, let's remember we're all here for conversation, not confrontation," she said with a half-smile. "It's called The View, not the duel." A few people laughed, but the tension didn't ease. Meghan turned toward the host's table, her tone lower now, heavier. "You know what the problem is?" she said. "Every time I talk about moving forward, someone drags me back. People love to provoke me just to call me defensive, and if I don't answer, they call me fake. There's no winning in that game." Joy tilted her head. "Maybe," she said, "but when you walk into a show like this, you know what the questions will be. That's not a trap, that's reality. And if you can't handle that, maybe the problem isn't the questions, it's the need to control them." The audience gasped again, louder this time. It was one of those moments where people forget they're supposed to be quiet and just react. Meghan's eyes flashed. "Handle," she repeated. "You think I can't handle being asked about my own life? I've spent years being dissected by people who have never met me. I'm still here, are I?" Joy didn't flinch. "Yes," she said, "but being here isn't the same as listening." That was it. The tone had shifted completely. The conversation had gone from pointed to personal. Meghan took a breath, exhaled through her nose, and leaned forward. "Joy, I came here to talk about my foundation, my work, and my purpose. But you seem more interested in reducing me to a headline. I wonder why that is." Joy set down her mug and met her gaze. "Because you keep making yourself the story," she said. "You say it's about the work, but the spotlight's always right here." The studio audience murmured again, caught between sympathy and shock. The floor manager made a subtle motion for the control booth, signaling a break, but the director held it. The cameras were locked in. This was television gold. Whoopi looked from Joy to Meghan and back again. "All right," she said, "let's take a deep breath. We're going to take a short break." But before she could finish, Meghan spoke, her voice steady but shaking underneath. "You know, Joy, I don't think you'd ever say that to a man. I don't think you accuse a man of being self-centered for speaking his truth." The audience clapped again, louder now. Joy raised her eyebrows slightly, her tone dry. "You'd be surprised, Meghan. I've said worse to plenty of men. The difference is they usually laugh." That made the room react audibly. A few people even laughed, though it wasn't the funny kind of laughter. It was sharp, nervous. Meghan froze, her expression blank for a moment, as if she couldn't quite believe what she'd heard. "So that's it?" she asked quietly. "That's the bar. As long as you humiliate everyone equally, it's fine." Joy smiled politely. "It's called equal opportunity honesty." Whoopi exhaled audibly, looking toward the control booth. "Okay," she said firmly, "we're taking a break." But before the band could even play, Meghan turned directly toward the camera. "This," she said, her voice rising slightly, "is exactly what I mean. You come somewhere hoping for dialogue, and instead you get mocked for existing, for being honest." The crowd reacted again, some applauding, others whispering. Joy folded her arms. "You're not being mocked," she said evenly. "You're being challenged. That's what talk shows do." Meghan's eyes narrowed. "No," she said. "This isn't a conversation, it's a setup, and it's the same everywhere I go. People pretend to want understanding, but what they really want is to provoke me into headlines." The words hit hard. The producers in the booth exchanged glances. One muttered, "We're losing control of this." Whoopi tried again, her voice gentle. "Meghan, let's take a breath. You've said a lot that's powerful today." But Meghan shook her head, still looking straight ahead. "No, Whoopi, what's powerful is that this is what happens when a woman refuses to be silent. People call it drama or ego or deflection, but it's not. It's exhaustion." The audience clapped again, though it sounded uncertain. Joy leaned forward one last time. "No one's silencing you, Meghan," she said. "You're sitting on national television right now. You've had every platform in the world. Maybe people are just tired of hearing the same story told the same way." That was it. The final spark. Meghan's composure cracked just slightly, but enough that it showed. Her voice rose, emotion breaking through. "You're tired of hearing it? Imagine living it. Imagine having your family, your name, your character shredded day after day, and then being told to smile and move on. I'm sorry if that makes people uncomfortable, but I'm not here to make anyone comfortable." The audience broke into applause again, full and echoing, the kind that fills a room with heat. Joy sat back in her chair, her face unreadable. Whoopi finally stood. "We need a break," she said firmly, looking toward the booth. "Now." The red light went off. The applause cut abruptly. Meghan sat there, breathing hard, her shoulders tense. Joy leaned back, crossing her arms, saying nothing. The crew moved silently, adjusting lights, resetting cameras, avoiding eye contact. In the control booth, the senior producer rubbed her temples. "This is a disaster," she muttered. "But it's the kind of disaster that trends." A floor manager approached Meghan with a bottle of water, but she waved it away. "I'm fine," she said quietly. "Let's finish this." But everyone in the studio knew this wasn't just another tense interview. This had become something else, something raw, something that couldn't be edited away with commercials or laughter cues. When they came back from break, the question wasn't whether the tension would return. It was how long Meghan would stay seated once it did. The applause light blinked as the cameras came back from commercial, but the clapping sounded hollow, almost reluctant. Everyone in the studio felt it. The atmosphere had changed. What had started as an interview about philanthropy had turned into something else entirely. It was no longer about the foundation, the book, or even the public persona. It had become personal. Whoopi Goldberg, ever the steady hand, leaned forward and spoke directly to the audience, her voice calm and deliberate. "Welcome back to The View," she said, her tone smoother than silk but heavy with unspoken tension. "We're continuing our conversation with Meghan Markle. We've covered some difficult ground, and I think we can all agree that strong opinions are part of what makes this show, well, The View." Laughter rolled weakly through the crowd, but the energy was tight, nervous. Joy Behar sat across from Meghan, legs crossed, hands folded in her lap, her eyes locked on her guest. Meghan's expression was calm, but her shoulders were stiff, every inch of her body communicating restraint. Whoopi turned to Meghan. "Before we move on, Meghan, I want to give you a chance to clarify anything that might have been misunderstood in the last segment." It was a lifeline, one final opportunity to dial down the tension. Meghan took a slow breath, nodded once, and met Whoopi's eyes. "I think what people misunderstand," she began, "is that I never wanted to be part of a spectacle. I've tried to focus on real work, mentorship, charity, advocacy. But every time I show up, it becomes about my past. It's exhausting." There was empathy in her tone, and for a moment the studio softened. The audience nodded. Even Joy seemed to consider holding back. But then Joy leaned forward, that same wry smile creeping back onto her face. "I get that," she said, "but when your past made you famous, it's kind of hard to separate the two." "Don't you think fame comes with the territory?" Meghan's head turned slowly. "Fame isn't a choice," she said. "It's a side effect, and sometimes it's poison," the audience murmured. It wasn't the kind of statement they expected from a morning talk show guest. Joy tilted her head slightly, unconvinced. "Sure," she said, "but the cameras are still rolling. You're here." "That's not exactly avoiding the poison, is it?" The line hit harder than Joy intended. Meghan blinked once, clearly taken aback. "Maybe," she said, her voice quieter now. "The only reason I'm here is because people like you won't stop pouring it." A collective gasp swept through the audience. The floor manager gestured frantically to the control booth, mouthing the word *break. But the director shook his head. The cameras stayed live. This was television gold, the kind of moment that would dominate social media before the show even ended. Joy didn't flinch. "Come on, Meghan," she said. "That's unfair. You came here to talk. I'm doing my job." "Your job," Meghan's tone sharpened, "to push people until they break so you can sit back and say you got the quote everyone will talk about." The air in the room was so still it was suffocating. Whoopi interjected, her voice low and firm. "Okay, ladies, let's keep this civil. We can disagree without tearing each other down." Meghan turned to Whoopi, her composure wobbling just slightly. "That's the problem," she said. "It's never a disagreement when it's me. It's a spectacle. It's ridicule dressed up as conversation." Joy let out a breath, equal parts frustration and disbelief. "No one's ridiculing you," she said. "We're asking questions." "That's what this show does. You've been through a lot, sure, but you're not the only person who's ever had it tough. Meghan's eyes flashed, the first sign that her patience had finally reached its limit. And you're not the only person who's ever asked a question, she said, but maybe you could try listening to the answers for once. The audience erupted into applause. Joy leaned back slightly, crossing her arms. The smirk on her face was gone now. This wasn't banter anymore, it was a standoff. Whoopi tried to smooth the air again. All right, she said, let's refocus. Meghan, before we wrap up, what do you want people to take away from your story? If you could tell the audience one thing, what would it be? It was meant to be an olive branch, but Meghan's voice trembled with frustration as she spoke. I'd tell them that behind every headline is a human being. Someone who's trying to live a life, to raise a family, to do good, and I'd tell them to stop treating pain like entertainment. Applause again, louder this time. Joy waited until the clapping died down before speaking. I hear you, she said carefully, but don't you think that's a little ironic? You've turned your pain into your platform. You write books about it, you make documentaries about it, you give interviews about it. You can't say you don't want the attention while building an empire on it. The air was electric. Meghan's expression froze. For a moment, it looked like she might stay silent. But then she spoke, and her tone carried a weight that silenced even the audience. You call it an empire, she said softly. I call it survival. When you're stripped of your voice long enough, telling your story isn't ambition, it's self-defense. You might not understand that, Joy, because you've never had the world decide who you are before you even open your mouth. The crowd broke into applause again, louder, more emotional this time. Meghan's voice trembled, but she didn't back down. Joy's face remained unreadable, but her jaw tightened. Whoopi leaned forward. We're having a moment here, she said, half to the camera and half to the audience. Let's take a breath. But Joy wasn't ready to let go. I think what people struggle with, she said slowly, is the contradiction. You say you want privacy, but you keep showing up to remind us how much you've suffered. Maybe people just want to move on, and they want you to move on, too. The sound in the room vanished. You could have heard a pin drop. Meghan's lips parted slightly, but no words came out at first. The cameras zoomed in closer, capturing every flicker of emotion across her face, shock, disbelief, and finally, resolve. I'm sorry, she said finally, her voice shaking but controlled. Did you just tell me to move on from being publicly humiliated, from being lied about, from being chased across continents by a press that didn't care if my life fell apart as long as it made a good headline? Joy didn't answer. Meghan stood suddenly, the movement startling the audience. The cameras scrambled to adjust. This, she said, gesturing around the room, is exactly what I mean. This is why people stop speaking up. Because the moment you do, someone tells you you've said enough, that your pain has an expiration date. The audience began to applaud, hesitant at first, then louder, rolling like a wave. Meghan's publicist appeared at the edge of the stage, trying to motion for her to sit down. But Meghan shook her head, her voice rising just enough to carry across the studio. I came here to talk about my foundation, about hope and community and resilience. But you couldn't resist turning it into a spectacle, because to you, that's better television. Joy opened her mouth to respond, but Whoopi raised her hand sharply. Joy, she said, let her finish. Meghan turned toward the camera, her eyes bright under the lights. If this is what happens when a woman speaks her truth, if this is what we've reduced conversation to, then I'm done. I'm not going to sit here and defend my right to exist anymore. The audience burst into applause again, some cheering, others simply stunned. Joy stayed silent. Whoopi tried to step in one last time, her voice calm. Meghan, we don't want you to feel attacked. You're welcome here, we've all had tough interviews. But Meghan shook her head. No, Whoopi, you've had debates, this was a trial. The crowd reacted again, half gasping, half clapping. Then she reached up, unclipped her mic, and set it gently on the table. Thank you, she said quietly, but I think I've said enough. The studio was silent except for the faint hum of the lights. Meghan turned and began to walk off the stage. The camera followed her automatically, capturing her exit as the audience stood, some clapping, some frozen in disbelief. Joy watched her go, expression hard to read, part regret, part defiance. Whoopi sat back, exhaling slowly. "Well," she said softly, "that was something." The camera cut to commercial, but the clip had already written its own legacy. Within hours, social media would be flooded with headlines. Meghan Markle walks out of the view. Joy Behar pushes Duchess too far. Tense exchange goes viral. Inside the control room, producers stared at their monitors in silence. One finally muttered, "That's going to break the internet." Backstage, Meghan's publicist caught up to her near the dressing room. "You shouldn't have walked off," she said breathlessly. "You gave them exactly what they wanted." Meghan turned to her, voice steady but quiet. "No," she said, "I gave myself what I needed." She stepped into her dressing room and closed the door. The applause from the studio was still faintly audible, but she didn't look back. On set, Whoopi addressed the audience when they returned from break. "We're going to wrap early today," she said gently. "Sometimes conversations get difficult, and that's okay. That's part of what we do here. But I think we can all agree that everyone deserves respect, even when we don't see eye to eye." The audience clapped softly, a respectful, subdued rhythm. Joy sat quietly, staring at the empty chair across from her. Later, when the show ended and the lights dimmed, the crew moved quietly through the studio. No one spoke. The tension still lingered like smoke after a fire. Joy finally stood, gathering her notes. Whoopi looked at her. "You went too far," she said simply. Joy didn't argue, she just sighed. "Maybe, but people were thinking it. I just said it." Whoopi shook her head. "Sometimes saying it doesn't make it right." That night, clips of the exchange dominated television and social media. News outlets dissected every word, every gesture. Commentators argued about who was right and who crossed the line. Some said Joy was brave for asking the hard questions. Others said Meghan was justified for walking out. But one thing was certain, the interview had become the story. Meghan stayed silent for days. She didn't release a statement, didn't appear on camera, didn't clarify anything. When reporters asked for comment, her spokesperson said only, "The Duchess stands by everything she said." Joy, meanwhile, opened the next episode of The View with a sigh. "Yesterday got intense," she admitted. "That's live television for you. Sometimes things go places you don't expect." Whoopi cut in before she could continue. "Sometimes they go exactly where you expect," she said, her voice cool but pointed. The audience applauded again, gentle, reflective. The world would keep talking about the clash for weeks. It became one of those moments that live beyond the screen, two powerful women, two opposing truths, one unforgettable confrontation. And somewhere away from the noise, Meghan sat by a window, watching the headlines refresh on her phone before setting it down. She looked out at the horizon, the light fading into a quiet evening sky. For once, there was no microphone. No stage, no questions, just silence, real silence, the kind she had been chasing all along. It wasn't peace, not yet, but it was a start.